Halo Infinite is easily the best Halo campaign that 343 has shipped, and it's not even close. It's fun, it's beautiful, but I do think there are some issues which you should be aware of before you decide to spend your hard-earned $60. I'll be giving my full review in today's video.
I'll be losing!
I think that's all of them.
Today's video is brought to you by Vite Ramen. Do you want to make healthy choices but still eat fast and delicious food? Vite Ramen is one way to take that easy step. You can use the link in the description and the code ECKHARTS to get 10% off your Vite Ramen order and some free gifts. More on Vite Ramen at the end of the video. I was lucky enough to play through all of Halo Infinite's campaign and experience its open world. I'll be giving my full impressions today. Now, there won't be any story spoilers in this video. However, I will be discussing aspects of the open world and the gameplay which you may want to experience on your own, so consider that before watching this video. At the end, I'm also going to be talking about my general impressions of the storyline without specifics, so I'll warn you guys before we go into that territory. Additionally, as this is uploaded, I've got a ton more content on X2, including things I wish I had known before the campaign and more. I'll be loading content over there today and over the coming days, so make sure you subscribe, link down below. Let's get right into it though. Halo Infinite for me is quite easily the best campaign that 343 has shipped. There's really no question. That being said, I was someone who really disliked both Halo 4 and Halo 5, and I'm talking about both gameplay and story, so that was a relatively low bar. That being said, I do think Halo Infinite does deserve discussion alongside the greats of the Bungie era. That being said, the game is both at times the deepest and most shallow Halo game ever created. My main concern going into Infinite was that the open world game would take away from the tight linear structure of the typical Halo campaign, and I'm sad to say that my fears were brought out. However, the campaign itself still managed to overall be really excellent. Let's start with the things that I really liked, because there was a lot about this game that was great. First of all, visually this game is super impressive. The Forerunner structures in this game blew my mind. This is what I've always wanted in a next generation Halo game, and it delivered. I didn't really like what 343 did with Forerunner stuff in Halo 4 and 5, but this was a return to Bungie era design, just up-res to a degree that I didn't even believe was possible. Even the doors opening will literally blow your mind, and as you progress through the game, you visit some really cool locations. Both a mix of new and old. As you travel the Halo ring, you'll see places that remind you of past Halo games, while also visiting new ones. One specific location, which I won't give specifics of, near the end of the game, literally took my breath away. It's super impressive, it's very easy to get immersed, and overall that was wonderful. And it's also pretty insane the degree to which you're able to freely explore both the open world and the more linear missions. It definitely feels like 343 put a lot of care into making environments that looked really good. The ring itself is also really spectacular to look at. It did lack that sense of mystery that the original Halo ring had. I think that was honestly because it's broken up into pieces and dominated by these almost platelet-like things which are building the ring back up. I would have preferred the environment in a more pristine condition, but still the overall design of the ring is great, the skybox is good, and there's lots of really interesting settings that make for cool natural firefights. Everyone has made the comparison that this game is a lot like an extended version of the first level of Halo CE, or rather the first level off the Pillar of Autumn, and I think that's a good comparison. Overall, weapons look good, enemies look good, the UI is pretty good as well. Visually, this is a good looking game. I do kind of wish they would have ditched support for the Xbox One and really tried to push things a little bit further for next generation consoles and PC. I did notice a lot of clip-in and whatnot when I played on medium for recording purposes, but to be honest, that's standard fare in an open world, and I think if you're playing on higher settings or even an Xbox Series X, which was not recording in high resolution, the game would look better and have less of those draw distance and pop-in issues. I'm going to give a brief spoiler about the environments we visit now, and that's just to say that although everything looked very good visually, it was really a lot of the same. The entire game is on one portion of the ring. I feel like that was really a missed opportunity, especially when playing multiplayer maps like Behemoth. Having just the desert vibe with that open sections of the ring gives an entirely different feeling to Zeta Halo that I would have loved to experience, and I actually feel like Behemoth was one of the best experiences on the ring, and that was multiplayer. It definitely does feel a little little bit stale after a while, visiting the same sort of looking locations with the same banished technology and the same Forerunner designs, but overall the visual presentation I think is pretty well done. That was, however, one thing I do feel like I have to mention. One of my other really big positives was just general gameplay. This is also the best playing of any of 343's Halo campaigns. A lot of my complaints about the past games are gone now. For one, there's no bullet spongy enemies. The Prometheans are gone. It's more of a traditional Halo mix of enemies, and ammo, unlike in Halo 4 especially, is readily available. Throughout the maps there are these canisters which you can use to refill either your kinetic weaponry, your electrical weaponry, your plasma weaponry, or on one or two occasions even your legendary weapons, so like your rockets or your snipers, whatever else. This means that realistically you can hold a BR or an assault rifle throughout an entire mission because you won't run out of ammo. You can use these canisters without having to actually find another BR on the ground. I think some people will naturally be a little bit against this choice because it allows the player to rely on their comfort weapons without having to explore the sandbox. I think about Halo 2 where you end up playing a lot of the end parts of the game with a Covenant carbine. That's not something you necessarily experience in Halo Infinite. It was kind of interesting though because you're also in a way encouraged to take different types of weapons. If I could choose, I'd probably take a Mangler and a battle rifle. However, because the Mangler does use kinetic projectiles, you can theoretically actually dry those canisters out of ammunition and then screw yourself over later on. I didn't really find that to be too much of a problem though. In terms of gameplay, it just also played very, very well. Like the actual movement of your Spartan. For one, you have 4 armor abilities that have a cooldown. There's no sort of limit on how many times you can use them as long as you wait for the cooldown, which you can usually decrease through upgrades. So you have the grapple shot, you have evade, you have the drop wall, and you have the sensor. Notably, you don't have the repulsor, which is kind of unfortunate because it's probably one of the most fun pieces of equipment. And the way it works is that you use the D-pad to swap between them. Now, this really means that you'll probably choose 1 or 2 pieces of equipment and sort of memorize the D-pad combinations. For example, I know that if I want to use my grapple shot, you press right on the D-pad, then you press right again. I mostly relied on that and the drop wall, which was right then up. The extra movement adds a lot to how you face enemies. It really gives Master Chief a good fluidity and it makes battles feel quite interesting. That is, despite the general poor level design, which I'll talk about when I get into my negatives section. Let's talk about the open world though, because for me, whether you enjoy this open world or not should be one of the considerations into whether you're going to pay full price for what has traditionally been a half-priced campaign. Let's talk about structure. So how the game works is you start off in 2 linear missions, then you're essentially given the open world and you almost naturally begin missions from that point on. So in a way, you're given some ability to customize the missions in the way that you want them to. If you want to attack a banished base with a tank, which the game definitely sets up on one occasion, you can do so. You can take Marines with you, you can bring whatever weapons with you. You're really able to sort of tailor your experience, which is definitely interesting. However, you can also pretty much completely skip the open world and like fast travel to missions and just play this like a traditional Halo single player. And that's actually how I played it through the first time around. I was on Heroic and I wanted to see what the experience would be like for someone who liked the traditional Halo campaign. Overall, you can pretty easily beat the story, I'd say, in 6 to 7 hours without going into the open world. So I think the degree to which you enjoy Halo Infinite's campaign will kind of depend on how much you enjoy the open world. I think the main strength of the hub world is probably its visuals. There's unfortunately not a whole lot to do. I'd say there are really 4 main types of activities. You can capture forward operating bases, you can liberate trapped Marines, either they're imprisoned or under fire, you can take down high value targets, or you can do takedowns on banished installations. I think it's this latter type of activity which offers the most variety, but still generally comes down to destroy fuel tanks so this banished facility will be taken down. Now these are quite fun. I think that the forward operating base capturing is probably the least interesting part. However, once you do capture a forward operating base, it's sort of like climbing a tower in Assassin's Creed. All of the other activities around are highlighted, as are things like Spartan lockers and your Spartan upgrade points, which you use to upgrade your suit. I think the degree to which you'll enjoy the other activities really comes down to how much you're able to make your own fun, because really, as Master Chief, with all of your equipment, and you can choose whichever weapons you want, Cont, you can pretty easily, even on Heroic at least, I haven't played through on Legendary, pretty much treat this like any Halo encounter. There were some different ones, like there was a high value target on a Wraith, for example. Sometimes the best approach is just to take your target down with the sniper rifle, but still, it's kind of just traditional Halo gameplay in a less structured format. And there's a lot of that, but I've got to say, unfortunately, I didn't feel too surprised as I was going through. Like, there was no encounters that really blew me away or that did anything unsuspecting, which is why at the beginning of this video, I called this sort of the widest Halo campaign, but also in a way, kind of a shallow one. That being said, there is room to make your own fun as you do these little activities in the world, and there's another one I forgot too. It's taking down banished radio bases. You unlock more Valor, which gives you more weaponry, vehicles, and marine teams. Additionally, you can also unlock special weapon variants by killing the high value targets, and you can use these both in your open world shenanigans or also when doing the campaign. There's one electric pistol especially that is amazing. I wish I would have had that when doing some of the later missions. When it comes to difficulty, by the way, I played on Heroic as I mentioned, and overall this felt easier than Halo 4, but probably a touch harder than Halo 3. The overall encounters weren't too difficult. I didn't find myself dying very much, certainly in the linear missions, except in boss battles. Boss battles are fun and fairly tough. Definitely one of my favorite additions to the game. I will say though, hunters in this game are downright terrifying. Like, they will kick your ass. They're very, very hard to defeat. I don't know if that was on purpose or not, but I think the hunter moments for most people will probably be among the most difficult parts of this entire game. Honestly, Halo Infinite is largely what you expect it to be. Like, they're pretty upfront that it's one biome. A lot of the gameplay takes place in this space. The open world isn't the most creative or inventive open world. That's very Far Cry-like. I know that some people pushed back against that comparison, but I do think it's fairly accurate. And although it's lovely, there's not a lot of life to it. Like, there's nothing dynamic that happens, unfortunately. There are some things, I guess, visually that happen. You see the banished ships flying around, you see fights going off in the distance, but none of that truly affects the player experience. I would have liked if the banished tried to recapture sections of the ring, or if there were maybe mini missions that you could find while playing. Right now, exploration grants you mostly collectibles like skulls and armor customization. But now I want to talk about downsides, and I will actually mention right off the bat skulls. You better make sure that you explore these missions the first time you play through them, because for some reason, there is no way to replay a mission in Halo Infinite without restarting the entire campaign. For me, that's sort of a questionable choice. Even after you beat the game, you can continue to explore in the open world, but you can't go back and replay missions. And I gotta say, I just don't get that. I would have liked them to just make an option, take it out of the open world context and just put the missions in a menu somewhere. Just not a great choice whatsoever. I think, however, my single biggest complaint about Halo Infinite is the design of the linear missions. First of all, I think they're better than Halo 4 and Halo 5. They don't waste your time, and the encounters are actually very fun, but it's not at all very memorable, and that's something that I also discussed with other players who had beaten the campaign. If I say, hey, you remember that bridge on Assault in the control room? I guarantee you know what I'm referring to. Halo Infinite, unfortunately, doesn't really have those moments. The visual styling already makes things feel kind of samey, as I mentioned, but a lot of the campaign is also just go into this room, survive this Covenant wave, or sorry, banished wave, and then open this door or get this power node so you can go up the elevator. It's a lot of that. Prior Halo games really relied a lot on traversal to tell this story. Like, again, I think of Assault in the control room in Halo 1 or various Halo 3 levels where really you just have to get through it, and it's the exploration and the unique scenarios which provide a lot of the fun. Halo Infinite really lacks that, and it's disappointing, I gotta say. There's also a lack of really big set pieces. I'm going to give a spoiler warning here because I want to talk about some things that aren't in this game which you guys might find disappointing. I'll give you a second. But there's nothing like a Warthog run. There's no Scarab battle. There's no big tank sequence unless you make one yourself. Most of the linear missions end up being within corridors, and I think that ends up being a bit of a mistake. Too much of the game, too much of the story feels like something the player could have done themselves in the open world, which is not a compliment to the open open world, it's unfortunately a discredit to the linear design. Again, the saving grace for all this, however, is that this game still manages to be very fun, and that is a compliment to the design of Master Chief, the weapon sandbox, and everything else, but it feels repetitive, especially when you're basically fighting the same enemies we've been fighting before. Skimmers are one addition that have been featured so far in marketing materials, so I'll mention them as well. They're not really relevant at all, really. Obviously, they're there for battles, but they kind of just behave like less annoying versions of the buggers from prior games. I think in hindsight, what I would have done if I were the lead campaign designer on Halo Infinite would be to maintain the open world, because I do think it provides a lot of option for player fun and messing around. But when you go into a level, stop trying to maintain that, or at least stop trying to maintain it for like half the levels. Instead, put the player in a very controlled experience, because that's what typically the most memorable parts of Halo campaigns are. I'm not trying to sound like I'm ripping on the game too much, because I did really enjoy it, but I will say when I was playing through the first two levels, which are probably the most structured of the entire campaign, I was really excited, especially in the Forerunner facility. I was still happy and I still enjoyed the game, which is not something I can say of the prior two campaigns, but I was also definitely trying to rush through latter portions because it just felt quite repetitive. Kind of like my video now where I said the same thing half a dozen times. Alright, so I'm going to give you guys a spoiler warning, because for the rest of this video, I'm going to be talking about the story. Now, I'm not going to go into any specifics. I'm not going to tell you who the Harbinger is or what the other mysteries of the ring are. However, I am going to be giving my impressions. I will say Halo Infinite had a very tough task. It's no secret that Halo 5 kind of abandoned Halo 4's story, and it at least seemed like Halo Infinite wanted to abandon the story from Halo 5 as well. At least that's kind of what we were led to believe. And I'll say that the game does a very good job, I think, and again, spoiler warning for those who want to experience this on their own, resetting the universe and putting the Master Chief in a fresh slate without, I'll say, a lot of the consequences of past games really catching up to him. Like, I will say this would have been, I think, an amazing Halo 4. That being said, it's also strange how much actually happens off screen and doesn't really feel like it's adequately explained. There were bits of the game and the story that I was expecting to experience and you just don't. It's quite a narrow story in terms of scope and characters and everything else. I would have liked to see more of a presence of the UNSC. I would have liked to see the story expanded a bit more into other characters, but this was definitely meant to be an unabashed Chief-focused story, and the trio of main characters is also fairly enjoyable, as is Escharum as a villain. The cutscenes were also a bit weird, and I definitely felt some of the rush that this game definitely experienced in them. Most of the cutscenes felt like two characters talking up close. You could actually manipulate the camera slightly during the cutscenes to kind of look around, which I thought was fairly odd. And this is kind of similar to how the game is missing the big set pieces of prior games. It's, I guess, more like Halo 1 in that way, but unfortunately on an even smaller scale. I can't fully decide how much I like the story. Again, I think they were doing as much as they could given the sort of jumbled state of the Halo universe, but without getting into specifics, it at times felt like it was continuing Halo 4 and 5's mistake of pushing past the science fiction parameters of Halo into fantasy, and definitely we were also starting to retread old ground. There were also parallels and connections in lore, especially that I was expecting to be addressed in the campaign that weren't, and that was a pretty big disappointment for me. I'll cover this more in specifics once you guys have had a chance to play through the game. I will say though, I'm excited for the future of Halo's story after the end of this game, and I'm interested to see what 343 does with the storyline into the future, which is not something I could say after Halo 5 specifically, and also even Halo 4. I was pretty out of things, so it's really a credit to 343, and I think you guys know this if you've seen my complaining on Twitter and on YouTube, that they managed to bring me back in. It does start to cross the line into the generic a little bit, I think, but it's alright. Alright, with that being said, this has been a very long video and I'm sick, so let's try to wrap this up. Halo Infinite is good. I think whether it's worth the $60 really depends on how much fun you think you can get out of the open world. Could I recommend it for someone who only enjoys the linear sections? I don't think I could. I don't think I could. They're really a step down, I think, in terms of set pieces from prior games, although the gameplay itself is very fun. I just don't really see myself wanting to replay the individual levels that much. But I said that's for someone who only enjoys the linear parts of a Halo campaign. The open world will certainly be offering some fun, especially if they do continue to add to the game in future DLCs and more, which I do expect will happen. The game is beautiful though. Some of the moments blew me away just in their ambience. It's also very, very fun. Whether you enjoy the story or not, I think is up to you. Personally, I thought it was pretty good, probably about as good as it could have been. I will say though, I have seen seen the ending legendary cutscene, and it did get me pretty excited. That's all I'll say. Maybe I'll do a full breakdown of that after the game is out and you've had a chance to play through it on your own. But guys, that's all for me today. Are you excited for Halo Infinite? How does my review make you feel? Let me know all of that and more down below. Also, tons more content coming on my second gaming channel, X2, so make sure you subscribe for more content over there. Anyway guys, have a good one, be safe, may the force be with you. Today's video was brought to you by my friends over at Vite Ramen, who are releasing their version 3.0 flavors. I know you guys might be wondering, heck, didn't they just have version 1.2? Where's version 2? Listen, it was such a big change. They went right to 3.0, and I can't blame them. I've been testing some of these flavors. Let me just tell you that they are amazing. You guys probably already know about Vite Ramen, but if you don't, they're a really easy way to eat healthy and live an ordinary life. Compared to other ramen, it's low in sodium, it's got lots of bioavailable nutrients, and of course it's still delicious. As I mentioned at the beginning, version 3.0 of Vite Ramen has dropped. I'll put the patch notes down in the description. There you can get a full look at what's changed and everything that goes into making Vite Ramen noodles and flavors. I've also got a brand new Eckhart's Ladder landing page for Vite Ramen. I've got something very special in the works as well, but follow that link and you can get free chopsticks, spoons, and a sticker. Plus use code Eckhart's for 10% off. You'll be helping not only a great company out, but also me.